For the second year in a row, Aston Martin is grappling with a problem seriously holding back its Formula 1 car. At the beginning of 2021, a few small but significant floor rule changes hurt the low-rake cars, which put Aston Martin on the back foot. It elected against solving that mid-season so it could switch focus to the development of its 2022 car and maximise this year's sweeping new technical regulations. But that hasn't worked. Aston Martin has actually gone backwards, and it could be a while before it makes the kind of progress that it needs to. Aston Martin was one of the first teams to switch focus to the 2022 car last year, and it hoped F1's new rules would give it a chance to return to the front of the midfield, having slipped from 4th to 7th in the Constructors' Championship in 2021. A low-key pre-season test created little expectation for the Bahrain season opener, although some, including us, suspected it was yet to show its hand. But in qualifying in Bahrain, Aston Martin lost both cars in Q1. Lance Stroll snuck through to Q2 in Saudi Arabia, but he was the slowest car in that segment. And over the first couple of races, Aston Martin has had the second slowest car, barely quicker than Williams and well adrift of the rest of the competitive midfield. Chief Technical Officer Andrew Green revealed during the Bahrain weekend that Aston Martin's big limitation at the moment is porpoising, the high-frequency bouncing occurring at high speed because of the ground effect aerodynamics. Green has estimated that this is worth up to 3/4 of a second in lap time. Given that's almost precisely the gap Aston Martin has to the front of the midfield, that might seem a bit convenient. But it's the same problem keeping Mercedes out of the lead fight, so for now we can give Aston Martin the benefit of the doubt that this issue is very real. And like Mercedes has found, there's no quick fix without sacrificing performance. Green says that Aston Martin has had to make quite a few compromises to the car setup to be able to run it without porpoising. Tapping into that restricted performance is therefore key, but this phenomenon was new to all teams when they ran their cars for the first time, so Aston Martin is still early in the process of fixing it and reckons it will be a few races before it makes serious progress. It has also had to reallocate development time to explore the issue, so any testing it is doing to find a proper solution and any subsequent physical changes to the car that brings will be separate to long lead time developments that were already in the works. These will either have to be delayed, scrapped entirely if they don't fit with Aston Martin's tweaked design direction, or juggled alongside the live development. However Aston Martin handles this problem, it will need to result in quick progress. Or else, with big expectations and an impatient boss like Lawrence Stroll in charge, there are bound to be consequences. Upgrades will be a key theme in F1 this season, with all new cars putting teams on a steep learning curve. Even before Aston Martin had a poor start to the season, it was already known to be working on significant development items. Performance director Tom McCulloch recently said that the car you're seeing now is nothing like the car we have in the wind tunnel. There is one rumour that Aston Martin could have a completely different side pod and floor design for the second half of the year to maximise performance in this new ground effect era. Presently, it's the only Mercedes engine team to opt for a wide side pod with a big undercut. It's hard to gauge just how much the Aston Martin will change this season, but we should expect significant upgrades. Green's stated aim for the base specification of the AMR22 was to leave it wide open to big changes and avoid getting stuck in development cul-de-sacs. Team principal Mike Crack claims it will be really difficult to change a complete concept mid-season, which is understandable. The budget cap means that Aston Martin can't just use increased resources in the Lawrence Stroll era to throw money at the problem without there being consequences. Anything extra that goes onto this year's car will reduce time and money that can be spent on the 2023 car. That's a judgment call every team has to make, but not every team is struggling like Aston Martin. Plus, while the team is waiting for its new factory to be up and running, it still has to make do with limitations in terms of facilities and resources. But it's still capable of plenty of development. There are broadly two strands for teams at the moment: the longer lead time stuff that will have been in the works for many weeks, and the stuff that teams will be working on now the cars have hit the track and the first meaningful lessons are learned. Any development items in the second category will take time to be implemented. Aston Martin says it has all the options open in developing its 2022 car, increasing the likelihood the AMR22 will undergo one of the biggest transformations this season, while also changing slowly in the meantime. It's likely that Aston Martin will keep bringing new components, which began with small changes to the side pod inlets, forward strake on the floor, and halo winglets in Bahrain. Whatever Aston Martin has in store in the short term will likely have predated its pointless start to the season, although depending on the complexity of the part, it is plausible that testing and the first races will have resulted in some rapid solutions. But in general, to put the early on-track lessons into the team's development cycle, getting on the car and get performance is going to take some time. Especially when it comes to areas like the floor, which is such a big focus for all teams, but especially Aston Martin given its specific problems.
Have you joined our league on the Grid Rival app yet? If you like motorsport fantasy games, then make sure you sign up and search for the Race League, or click the link in the description of this video to play against members of our team and thousands of fans. On Grid Rival, you can manage your own fantasy team on what race fans are calling hands down the best fantasy motorsport app out there. Joining a league on Grid Rival will make every race more exciting, more engaging, and of course more competitive. You can even create your own league and invite your friends. Plus, it has a great group chat function so you can talk to other players to see what strategy everyone is using. Grid Rival is an unofficial application and not associated with Formula 1, MotoGP, or any of their athletes.
Aston Martin has described its lack of performance as a negative surprise, but it has also been hurt by the absence of its lead driver. Sebastian Vettel's positive COVID-19 test ahead of the Bahrain Grand Prix left Aston Martin with Lance Stroll as its only reference from pre-season testing, as reserve driver Nico Hülkenberg stepped in to drive the car for the first time. Vettel was then unable to return for the second race in Saudi Arabia, so Hülkenberg continued to deputise. Now, we rate Hülkenberg very highly. He's a good, proven driver and has experience of what's required as a last-minute substitute. But with no testing of the 2022 cars, minimal simulator time, and a lengthy on-track absence stretching back to the Eiffel Grand Prix in October 2020, he shouldn't have been out qualifying Stroll in Bahrain. It only showed what Aston Martin is missing without a real leader. Vettel's COVID test was only known on the Thursday before Bahrain, which Crack said came at a point where we really do not need it. Crack said that leaves you with only one reference, which is always quite dangerous. It's difficult for Nico, obviously, to jump in like that. He has no reference either. He didn't test, so you are a bit in the dark. For sure it was not a help, but still, that does not say that the car is quick. And that is the underlying concern for Aston Martin and also Vettel. Stroll outraced Hülkenberg in both Grand Prix, where even safety car interventions were not enough to elevate the Aston Martins into points contention. It is therefore unlikely that the presence of four-time world champion Vettel alone would have completely transformed Aston Martin's fortunes and results. So while Vettel has recovered from his illness and will return in Australia, it would be a surprise if the Aston Martin is suddenly a top 10 car. Especially as Vettel has some catching up to do, given everyone else now has 2 full race weekends with their cars while he was on the sidelines. Vettel should at least be up to speed before too long. Once he is though, he's unlikely to find that the car's performance has picked up quite so quickly.